October 1994. A survey crew drops a weighted line into a gorge in western North Carolina, checking its depth for a state report. 20 years earlier, a different team measured that identical stretch of rock. The two readings don't match. Nothing eroded between them fast enough to explain it. That's the first gorge on this list. 8 more are waiting, and each carries a measurement that refuses to hold still. If you're watching from anywhere near these ridgelines, tell us your region below. You might already recognize one of these places under another name. 9 gorges. 0 clean answers. Let's go down. That 1994 reading came from Linville Gorge, cut into the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. The Cherokee called it ECO, meaning river of many cliffs, and the name still fits. Walls drop nearly 2,000 feet in places, and the U.S. Forest Service has surveyed it repeatedly since the 1930s. Each survey used better equipment than the last. Logic says the numbers should have gotten more precise over time, not less consistent. They didn't. A 1936 Civilian Conservation Corps report lists the gorge's maximum depth at one figure. The 1994 state survey lists a different one, off by nearly 40 feet at the same marked point. Forest Service records from 2003 attempted to resolve the gap and instead added a third number, splitting the difference but matching neither original reading. Geologists blame instrument drift, shifting benchmark points, human error compounding across 60 years. Maybe that's all it is. But nobody has gone back to reconcile the 3 readings into one, and the most recent official trail map still cites the 1936 figure, the one every later survey disagrees with. Stand at Wiseman's View and look down into that gap. The rock hasn't moved in any way a hiker could see. The number attached to it has moved twice. 90 miles northwest, Breaks Canyon straddles the Kentucky-Virginia line, carved by the Russell Fork River through 5 miles of sandstone. Locals call it the Grand Canyon of the South, and the comparison holds up. What doesn't hold up is the canyon's official elevation profile. A 1972 topographic survey and a 2011 LiDAR scan, a far more accurate laser-based method, show the canyon's deepest point in 2 different locations entirely, nearly a quarter-mile apart. LiDAR should have corrected the older map, not contradicted it at a different spot. State park geologists interviewed for a 2015 regional report called the discrepancy unresolved and moved on to other findings without further comment. No follow-up survey has been conducted since. 2 gorges. Numbers that shouldn't be able to disagree this badly, and we're only getting started because gorge number 3 comes with a detail that turns solid ground into something far less certain. Solid ground is exactly what Devil's Bathtub in Southwest Virginia calls into question, though not through rock. Through water. The gorge holds a series of pale turquoise pools carved into Little Stony Creek, and hikers have measured the creek's flow rate at the same marked crossing for decades. In dry seasons, a portion of that flow simply vanishes underground before reaching the pools below, then reappears further downstream with no visible sinkhole, no cave mouth, nothing a geologist could point a camera at. Karst topography can explain underground water loss in limestone country. Here's the problem. This stretch of Virginia sits on sandstone, not limestone. Sandstone doesn't typically dissolve into the kind of channels that swallow a creek. A 2009 hydrology survey flagged the anomaly, recommended dye tracing to map where the water actually goes, and the recommendation was never funded. The creek still vanishes and reappears every dry summer, unmapped and unexplained. Quick pause here. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't your average ghost story channel. We dig through actual survey data most people never bother to read. If that's the kind of digging you want more of, Subscribing costs nothing, and it tells us to keep pulling these records. Now go northwest into West Virginia, where Blackwater Canyon cuts through the Allegheny Plateau near Thomas. The Blackwater River earns its name honestly, stained near black by tannins from surrounding red spruce and hemlock. What's stranger is what the U.S. Geological Survey found when it compared decades of stream gauge data at 2 points along the canyon. Water volume entering the gorge at the upper gauge consistently exceeds what the lower gauge records downstream, a gap too large for evaporation or normal seepage to explain on its own. Engineers proposed an underground diversion channel, something pulling river water beneath the canyon floor and routing it elsewhere. No such channel has ever been located, mapped, or confirmed. The gap in the numbers remains exactly that, a gap with a name but no known cause. 2 more gorges, 2 more places where water refuses to add up the way it should. Gorge number 5 is where those small contradictions stop looking small entirely. Cheat Canyon cuts through Preston and Tucker counties in West Virginia, 11 miles of whitewater and sheer rock that rafting guides call the wildest stretch in the state. It's also the best documented gorge on this entire list, which makes what happened here harder to wave away than anything before it. In 1971, the Army Corps of Engineers surveyed the canyon's rock face while evaluating flood control options, rating a specific stretch near River Mile 6 as structurally stable, low risk for slope failure. 31 years later, the West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey ran an independent stability assessment of that same stretch. Their rating: high risk, active slope movement, unsuitable for any permanent structure. Rock doesn't destabilize on its own timeline that fast without a trigger. No flood of record hit that section between 1971 and 2002. No earthquake, no logging operation, no blasting nearby. The bedrock simply went from stable to unstable on paper, with nothing in between to explain the shift. Here's where it gets harder to dismiss. When a researcher compiling a 2018 regional hazard report contacted both agencies to reconcile the 2 ratings, the Corps of Engineers said the original 1971 data was archived and unavailable for review. The state's own findings stood, but its team had no access to the Corps' original methodology either. 2 federal and state agencies, describing the same 60 feet of rock, and neither one can explain how the other reached its number. That gap sat there, unresolved, for over 4 decades. It still sits there. Rafting outfitters still run trips past that exact stretch every season, following a river route that was rated safe by one government agency and unstable by another, with no third assessment ever commissioned to settle it. Float past that wall today, and nothing about the rock looks any different from any other stretch of the canyon. Somewhere in a filing cabinet, though, 2 federal records are still quietly disagreeing about whether the ground above your head is holding. For Gorges down, this next one ties every contradiction so far into a single unbroken thread. That thread starts in northeast Georgia, at Tallulah Gorge, a 2-mile chasm nearly 1,000 feet deep, once nicknamed the Niagara of the South. Georgia State Parks maintains detailed trail distance markers along both rims, updated and republished multiple times since the gorge became a state park in 1993. Surveyors walking the same rim trail in opposite directions have logged different total distances for the identical loop, a discrepancy first noted informally by trail staff in 2001 and never fully resolved since. Direction shouldn't change distance. A trail is a fixed physical length regardless of which way someone walks it. Park officials attributed early measurements to inconsistent pedometer calibration, then replaced hand counters with GPS units in 2007. The gap persisted anyway, smaller than before, but still present, still direction-dependent, still without a clean explanation on file. Now compare that to Doe River Gorge in eastern Tennessee, where an old East Tennessee and western North Carolina railroad grade once ran through 9 miles of narrow rock passage nicknamed Tweetsie Country. Railroad surveyors in the 1880s and a modern rail trail conservancy in the 2010s each measured the grade's total elevation change through the gorge. Their totals differ by roughly 60 feet, despite both teams working from the same fixed endpoints at either mouth of the canyon. 60 feet doesn't vanish quietly on a survey. Somebody's instrument was wrong, or something about the terrain itself resists being pinned to one consistent number. The Conservancy's own project notes, released alongside their 2016 trail restoration report, call the discrepancy unusual and leave it there, unexplained, buried in an appendix most visitors will never read. 500 miles apart, and both share the exact same strange symptom: distance and elevation, the most basic measurements a surveyor can take, refusing to behave consistently at either location. It's no longer one anomaly. It's a signature, and it shows up again in the final 2 gorges on this list, the ones with almost no public survey history at all. Almost no public survey history is exactly what makes Gorge number 8 so unsettling. Tucked into the Cumberland Mountains along the Kentucky-Tennessee border, locals call it Sinking Gorge, though it appears on official Forest Service maps under a separate, more clinical name entirely. Unlike the previous 7, this one has only a single documented survey on file, conducted in 1963 by a 2-man Forest Service crew mapping timber access routes. Their field notes, preserved in a regional archive, contain a strange margin comment beside the depth measurement. Figure uncertain, recommend resurvey. No resurvey ever happened. 62 years later, that 1963 number is still the only official depth on record for a gorge visited by hundreds of hikers annually, based on a measurement its own surveyors didn't fully trust when they wrote it down. Gorge 9 sits even further off the map, literally. Located in a remote section of the Nantahala National Forest in North Carolina, it has no official trail, no published depth figure, and no state or federal survey on record at all. What exists instead is a single 1978 geological field report, written by a graduate student mapping rock formations for a university thesis, describing the gorge's basic dimensions in passing as part of a broader regional study. That thesis measurement has never been independently verified by any agency in nearly 50 years. No Park Service assessment, no LiDAR scan, no follow-up study of any kind. A single unpublished estimate from one field trip is, as of this recording, the entire official record for how deep that gorge actually runs. Step back and look at all 9 together. A depth that shifted twice. An elevation profile split a quarter-mile apart. Water disappearing on rock that shouldn't allow it. 2 government agencies disagreeing about the same 60 feet of stone. Distances that changed depending on which direction someone walked them. And finally, 2 gorges nobody in an official capacity has bothered to measure again in over half a century. None of these are ghost stories. They're gaps, sitting quietly in filing cabinets and thesis archives, waiting for someone with the right equipment and enough curiosity to go back down and check. 9 gorges. 9 numbers nobody's ever fully trusted, and not one resurvey scheduled to fix that. So here's the real question worth sitting with. What would a modern team actually find down there if they finally went back and checked? Tell us which gorge's numbers you'd trust least. We'll see you down in the next one.